So I've got 3ds Max open, and first thing I'm going to do before running anything is just make sure the program's in its initial state by resetting on the main menu. I'm going to reset, and then I'm not going to save anything here, so I won't save, and then yes, I do really want to reset. So then I'm going to check my units under customize and then unit setup. There's a little trick here. If you know in advance you're going to bring something in from Revit, set the system units to feet. It's one of those unusual things, because Revit works essentially with feet as a system unit when it exports to Max.
When we start working out measurements, we're going to have to convert it?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's just the way it's programmed behind the scenes. You will never need to see this.
Okay, good.
Yep, so you don't have to work in feet. It's just the way Revit gives you things. And again, even if you're working in a metric file in Revit, it's the way it makes the FBX file. So no, that's right. But look, if you want, look, have a look here at this distance from origin. That happens to be set to a foot in millimetres. That is a foot, 304.8, which is an easy number to remember. Do you know how many millimetres in an inch? Another one to remember? Yeah, it's 25.4. That's a really good one to remember. 25.4 times 12 is that. So you don't even need to remember this, just remember 25.4. Okay, so I've set it to feet, and then I can have the display unit on anything I want. So you can flip-flop between any of these. You can have it, if you get something from America that's been drawn in feet, you may want to change it to show you the measurements in feet here. But generally you can have it set to metric and then whatever you like, millimetres, centimetres. You can change these anytime, it won't affect your file. But the system units, it's good to set that at the beginning and then not change it after that. Okay, so units is often the only thing you have to think about when you first start a new file, and then you can start modelling. So I'm just going to do some freeform modelling here, trying to make or some shapes and things that would be difficult to make using Revit. And so I'll start with a box. It's often a good starting point for lots of different things. And I'm going to use it to make an unusual wall. So once I've clicked on box, I'm going to click and drag in the top viewport to make my initial shape. And then after I've clicked and then let go to set the 2 points for the diagonal corners on the base, then you need to lift the cursor up to set a height. Now I haven't worried too much about the size, because over here you can see it's giving me that size, and it's come up as, what is it, 5.6 metres roughly by 29 metres by 18 metres, which is far too big. So I'm going to type in something different. Starting with the, well, let's do the length first. I want this to be the thickness of a wall, maybe a fairly thick wall, so I'll make it 500. But you can see that's still a lot narrower than what I had. And then the width, I don't need this to be an exact length, so I'll simply click and drag on that spinner and lower the value there. And then the same with the height. I'm just going to click and drag to change that value.
Did you click down and then drag down, or you click either and drag either?
Yeah, just click on either and drag. Click and drag, yeah. And so, having done that, I'm panning and zooming in the perspective view. What I didn't show you is that you can change viewports at any time without losing your selection, simply by right-clicking. And so that way it's going to change which viewport you're operating in with the zoom and the pan, and also anything else you're working on. So I'll bring this back over and give myself some more room. And then with the button in the bottom right corner, you can minimise and maximise the current viewport. So if I right click on the front viewport, same thing again, minimise and maximise that one. And then also in that panel, the button above will zoom extents all, which you might think is an unusual thing if you're familiar with AutoCAD, which has zoom extents and zoom all. It doesn't have zoom extents all. This does because zoom extents all means zoom extents in all viewports. So it's fitted the shape into all of those 4 viewports. Perspective works a bit differently, but it basically fit there. And then you've got the zoom button, which is handy if you want to zoom in smaller increments than you get with the wheel. The wheel you can see is doing it in pretty big jerky movements there, but that zoom button does it a bit more smoothly. So I've got this wall shape, and now I want to start deforming it. So I'm going to go into the Modify tab, and you'll see then on the Create panel you'll sometimes lose those properties. When you first make the object they'll be there, but then they'll go away because it's ready to make something new. So this panel is for creating things. The second panel, Modify, gives you the properties of the object that's selected. And so I can use that to add more segments. I can add width segments, length segments, which in this case aren't necessary because that's going to divide the wall across its the depth, which I don't want to change. And then the height segments I'll add and just put a couple in there. So I can just put one in there, so I've got 2 segments. Okay, so I can also change the width and the height here just like before, so the length as well. I shall leave that on 500. And then the width, obviously, and the height. Make it a bit lower actually. Okay, so again I'm going to maximise the perspective view, and now I'm going to change it. So at the moment it's a box. You can see in the Modify panel it is, as far as Max is concerned, a box object which has these properties. When I right click and go to Convert to Editable Poly. Okay, so that's a standard process in Max. This is often the way you make editable polys. You can't really make them from scratch, but you can convert almost anything into them. And so with an editable poly, you get the tools that you use all the time for modelling in Max. Vertex, Edge, we'll skip Board for now, Polygon, and Element. Okay, so I'll just show you those separately. Yeah. So you'll see them come up when you are in any graphics mode, but to make it a bit clearer, I'm going to switch to wireframe, and you'll see in the top of each viewport it gives you the graphic display, a lot like Revit. So you have realistic, which is again a lot like realistic display in Revit. When you right click there, you'll see again like Revit you have modes like shaded, which doesn't look very different here, and then the one I'm after, wireframe, which again is just like Revit, makes things see-through. And then we can see the vertices on the other side as well. So I'm selecting these different things, but I can't move them. That's because at the moment I'm on Select Object, which again is just like your Modify button in Revit. Over to the right you have Select and Move. So with that I can use these gizmos, and it's called a gizmo, this axis. So you'll see this in Max, also in Revit as well, if you've done any mass modelling or using adaptive components and things like that.
Yeah, that's the one I used to try to model the triangle thing, and it ended up being massive.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's right. Because the maths models are set up for whole buildings and doing envelopes of buildings and things like that. So they are by default pretty big, or the space is big. So yeah. Yeah, no, but it's just a matter of getting the size you want initially. But I know it's set up for working on big things. Yeah. So once you've got the gizmo though, if you look at the axes there, you can see X, Y, and Z labelled red, green, and blue equals X, Y, and Z. So if you click and drag on one of those arrows, try to maybe at first avoid the squares. I mean, they just do combinations of them, but those yellow squares in the middle. Instead, I'm just going to go to the end to pick up the arrow, and I can bring this out. And I'll go back to shaded, so you can see then what's happening. Again, maybe bring this one out, but not as much. So that's just freezing a bit. Okay, so that's in Y. If I go to Z, I can bring that up or down. Orbiting around. And then let's go over to the side here. So, well, I'll bring the other end, I'll bring this end, sorry. So if you want to select multiple points, you can hold down Control. I'm just orbiting if you've forgotten this. It's in Revit, it's Shift and the middle mouse button. But in Max, it's Alt and the middle mouse button to orbit. So I'm just going to zoom in to get that vertex, and I can move just that point out, and again go to just one of them and drag that point. Okay, so making this kind of geometry in Revit can be awkward. You can do it, but it's not as simple as it is here. So now I might want to add to this, and I don't know if you've seen the sorts of designs I'm basing this on. It's a pretty common thing in interiors these days, doing these sorts of deformed surfaces for fit-outs and things. I've actually been into a few. There's a guy I used to study a lot, an interior designer who does work in Japan, and his name just escapes me at the moment. But I went and saw a lot of his buildings over there, and I've done one design that's similar that I built. And so, yeah, it's actually pretty easy to build this stuff, but again, a lot of programs make it more difficult than this. Okay, so I've got some different placements for my vertices. Now I'll go to Edge, and obviously I can use it to move whole edges. So I can select this and move it up, down, and obviously back and forward. Again, I'll skip border for now and go on to Polygon. So with polygons, you work with often quite different things to the way you work with edges and vertices. I can obviously move them and using the axis in a similar way do those things, but I can also extrude. So going down in the panel here, one of these common tools you use all the time is extrude, and I'll just click and drag on this surface and I can bring that out and add more to it.
Which way were you moving it? Moving it up or across?
Across. So, well, you click and drag on the surface, so it's still there.
Yeah.
When you see that symbol, click and drag.
So even though you're dragging to the left, the image is
Got it.
Yeah, that's right. So just actually up, you click and drag and then move up. So it's just, don't even think about that sometimes, but yeah, that's right, it's up. And then down goes backwards, which I don't want. You can go backwards, it goes into the surface, which I don't want. So I've got some extra surfaces now. And then I can go back to edge or vertex and again make sure it's on move and start again changing these points around.
So did you pull the Y away from you? With one of the vertices? Not Y. Y.
Yeah. So once I go too far, it'll go through the back. Yeah. Okay, so again, this sort of irregular shape, and then, well, I'll just show you the last one. Element, in this case, is just going to select the whole thing. So probably at this stage you don't need to worry too much about element, and border won't come up at all here because I don't have any open edges. But the main sub-objects, these are called, you'll be using at first vertex, edge and polygon. So then I'll just turn that off. So you can see before, one of them was yellow, and also you would have seen up the top that this editable poly is yellow too. Click on the plus and you'll see it has the one that you've activated. It's just another way of getting to it. So vertex you can see up there, edge and so on. And then, it's probably not obvious at first, but you can't select anything else. It's like being in sketch mode in Revit. So to get back out, you need to click on one of those things that's yellow, and then you're back to the top level, where you can then go and select new objects or make new objects. So I can make another box here and again set the properties I want. And obviously modify that. Then the ground surface, if I wanted to have a floor, you could use a box for that. But I just want to show you one other object that's really useful at first, planes. And so with a plane, you can make a flat surface that doesn't need a depth. And again, on the Modify tab, I'll get the properties so I can change the width and the length. And then adjust the number of segments as well if I don't need that detail. Alright, so I'll just maybe show you a couple of little tricks there to copy things that you've made already. One of the things that throws people off at first in Macs is that there's no copy button. Have a look around, you won't find one. It's assumed that you are using shortcuts when you're using a program like this, and the shortcut for copy is Shift. So hold down Shift and then just do what you would do normally to move something. So here I've got the top level selected, so I'm moving the whole object. If I click and drag on the Y, it'll move it left and right. Hold down Shift, click and drag, and I get a copy. I'll just leave it on copy. Rotate works in a similar way to move. So, and I'm going pretty quickly through these, but I'll stop in a minute. I'm going to, with the viewport at the top, I'll show you this. So you've got the different axes there, but a good way to use rotate at first is to use this grey one in a viewport that's orthogonal. So that way it's just rotating as you would in a program like AutoCAD, 2D rotating basically. And if you have this one here, angle snap, it'll do it in even angles. So I can rotate that one around and easily get, you know, a copy that I can modify. And so then, you know, doing things like tables and chairs, you can do really quickly and easily with things like cylinders and again, they have similar properties to boxes, so you can set the detail and height segments in a similar way. Again, you can copy them just like a box, so if I hold down Shift, click on the Y and move it down, it'll give me a copy, and then I can just change the size of this that up. Okay, so I know it's a very simple table, but you know, it's something you can do in no time. And then maybe just one final thing, if I wanted a series of copies, Shift, dragging on the X, then I'll get a copy to the left, and then notice you've got number of copies. I'll increase that to, say, we go to 5. It'll do a series of copies. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you can get those sort of irregular shapes, and maybe I'll just turn on the edges so you can see there. Oh, it's not even showing up because that's a dark colour. The colours are randomly assigned in Max, but you can obviously change them to whatever you want afterwards. But just imagine trying to model that in Revit. It would be a bit of a process. I know some people are doing it at the moment in their final year projects, doing deconstructivist designs, and it's been interesting for them, but and they've done it, but it's just taken a while to get things that in Max would only take a little while. So anyhow, I'll give you time to try some of that, And it's good to get what you've done in Revit and try importing that into Max as well, and modelling around those things if you have something ready to go in Revit. Otherwise, you can just start modelling in Max. But also, yeah, don't forget about the exercises I've given you, and you know, that will obviously give you more step-by-step instructions. So yeah, I'll just finish that video there.